Hello, welcome to Children's Church, VIA Technology. Good morning, good evening, wherever, whenever you might be watching. I'm so thankful that we can have Children's Church online. Plus, it's pretty amazing that we can have church online too. Some people still can't go to church, but they're able to hear the message online like we're doing right now. God has blessed us to have our church open and to be able to worship in our new renovated sanctuary. Don't worry, we are being very careful. We are practicing those 3 W's that we talked about. We're wearing our mask, we're washing our hands or using hand sanitizer, and we're keeping back that safe distancing at least 6 feet. And the ushers and the deacons are seeing that everybody is keeping that distance, and just like the state guidelines, like we're supposed to do. And if, speaking of gloves and stuff, don't worry about coming to church and being safe, because we've got hand sanitizer, we've got gloves, we've got masks. If you get to church and oh my goodness, I don't have any, I forgot. We've got them right there for you. So we can still still go and worship and be in our church. And I am so thankful that we can. And like I said, you try not to worry about it, because we're doing everything that we can to be safe and to keep everyone well. And speaking of masks, as of Friday, our governor was telling everybody, when you're going to be out in public, you're going to wear a mask. It might be inconvenient. Some people aren't going to like it. But if we wear a mask, we might have some little something. We might have a sore throat, or we might be having some kind of bug or something that we don't know about. Much less if we might have the early stages of that old bad COVID-19 that we're hearing so much about. So if we wear one to keep our own self protected from anybody else, that helps for it not to spread so bad. And it's been really bad again. The numbers are up really bad. So we want everybody to do what we can. And if wearing a mask, if that's going to help, and practicing safe distancing, we've still got to do it, because it's a long way from being through with this. And without a miracle from God, we're going to be in this a while. So we've got to really be smart, okay? Now, are you ready? Let's find out about Joseph. Where is Joseph? You know where he is. If you watched last week, you know where he is. Joseph is in a dungeon, which is like a prison, under Potiphar's house. Why was he there? Mrs. Potiphar had told that terrible lie on him, so Potiphar had no other choice but to believe his wife instead of Joseph. And that was not good, because he lost his trust in him. Now, while Joseph was in there were 2 men that were the king of Egypt's cupbearer and baker. These were important men with very special jobs. Let's go back briefly and talk about those jobs. Let's see. The cupbearer had to sip the king's wine before he drank it to make sure that it wasn't poison. Well, the baker, he had to do the same thing with his basket of food. Whatever kind of food that he had to go ahead and he had to maybe taste the food to make sure that it wasn't poisoned either. For some reason, we don't know why, they had made that king really mad. And it must have been pretty bad and upset him, mighty bad, to throw him in that same dungeon. Well, even in that dungeon, Joseph was still trusting God and being a good and caring person. Okay, on with the story. The cupbearer and the baker each had a dream the same night. The next morning, Joseph saw them, and they just looked so sad. And he wanted to know what was the matter. He was like, why are you looking so sad? So they told him, we had a dream. And nobody could interpret the dreams. First, the cupbearer. He said, in my dream, I saw a vine in front of me. And on the vine, there was 3 branches. As soon as it budded, or the leaves were on it, it blossomed. And then, as it blossomed, it had 3 clusters of ripe grapes on it. Pharaoh's cup, remember Pharaoh, was in my hand, and I took the grapes and I squeezed them in Pharaoh's cup and put the cup in his hand. Well, that doesn't sound like a really bad dream, right? Joseph said, this is what your dream means. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your job, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just like you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when you get out, things are going okay with you. He says, Joseph said, please remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. And Joseph even went on to tell him a little bit about himself, how that he got there, how from his homeland, how his brothers sold him, and he ended up there. And poor Joseph, he told him again how that he had not done anything wrong, that he didn't deserve anything to be in that awful dungeon. Well, when the chief baker saw that the cupbearer's dream was looking favorable, was looking pretty good, he began to tell Joseph his dream. He said, I had a dream too, and on my head, of all things now, on his head, I had 3 baskets. Well, Miss Norma can't put 3, we're just going to put 1. On basket of all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. But the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. Well, this dream doesn't sound too good, because it sounded to me like the birds are eating all of the food, and Pharaoh's not going to be real happy if he doesn't come up with his food, right? So anyway, Joseph goes on to tell him that the 3 baskets were 3 days. 3 days, just like it was with the cupbearer. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole. Let's find out what impale means. And also, lifting up your head, we found out about that too. Impale means to push a sharp-pointed object through something, but especially like an animal or a person's body. Our lesson is in the Old Testament, but who else in the New Testament did this happen to? Jesus' body was nailed to a cross. God's word was being fulfilled from that. Right on, children. It's amazing how his word is being fulfilled from the Old Testament right on. But the big difference here is we know that Jesus hadn't done anything wrong. Jesus hadn't done anything to deserve that. Lift up his head. This meant he would hang him. Well, this is terrible. It's not sounding so good. Again, God helping Joseph to interpret it. Joseph knew exactly what the dream meant. Sadly, things were not going too well for the baker. It must have been really hard for Joseph to tell him the bad news, such bad news to the baker, but he had to tell him the truth. And children, the Bible says to always speak the truth in love. And that comes from Ephesians 4:15. Joseph told the baker that in 3 days, Pharaoh was going to order that he be killed and hang his body for everyone to see. That doesn't sound like entertainment. And he's going to do that for all these people to see, making a public spectacle out of him. This was a terrible fate for the baker. Joseph trusted that God was telling exactly what was going to happen. Knowing that Pharaoh would execute the baker, Joseph didn't ask the baker to put in a good word for him. It was no use. He knew it was going to be too late for the baker. Well, 3 days, and we're at 3 days again, 3 days later was Pharaoh's birthday. He put on a huge banquet for all his officials and staff. Here we go. He summoned the chief cupbearer and chief baker to join the other officials. How about this? He restored the cupbearer to his former job so he could hand Pharaoh his cup, just like Joseph told him. He was forgiven. Pharaoh trusted him again. Joseph must have been really happy about this. So just maybe, he would remember Joseph to Pharaoh like he asked him to. Well, unfortunately, the baker didn't get his position back. Pharaoh impaled the chief baker just like Joseph said. He was killed for what he had done. The Bible didn't say, but it must have been really bad. You see, children, these dreams, this was just not something, I just had a bad dream and woke up. These dreams became reality. You think there's hope for Joseph now? The cupbearer was supposed to put in a good word for Joseph, and just maybe Pharaoh would let him out of prison. Then he could go back to his father and back to his homeland. Can you just think how he must have felt every time that he heard that prison door open? I can almost see him just like jumping up and down every time that it opened, getting really excited, thinking, they finally come to get me. I'm finally going to get out of this terrible place. But what's taking so long? Pharaoh's chief cupbearer forgot all about Joseph. After all that he had done for him and interpreted his dreams, he forgot all about Joseph and never gave him a second thought. I wish I could tell you the end of the story right now so you would know that God was in complete control of the situation. But you knew that. You know he has the whole time, and we've talked so many times that he had a plan. Even though the cupbearer forgot about Joseph, God didn't. God did not forget the promise he made to Joseph back in Canaan through Joseph's 2 dreams. Remember the sheaves? Cows? Cows? Come back next week to hear the amazing way that Joseph gets out of prison. And God never forgets His children. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for allowing me to share your word with the children and their families. I humbly ask you to please be with all the families who have so much sadness and sickness in their lives right now. I know you're in control of all of our lives, and we are your children. Life seems so unfair at times, but help us to be like Joseph and never lose our faith in you. We know you will help us through anything, and we know you love us. Bless us as we go about this week, and may we always give you the glory for all things. And all of God's children said, I love you, Jesus.